The heavy oak doors of my home swung open. They did not knock. They simply walked in as if they owned the place. I sat in my wheelchair, my hands trembling slightly against the cold metal armrests. It had been 6 months since I suffered that mild stroke. 6 months of absolute silence from my eldest son, Arthur. 6 months of empty promises from my eldest daughter, Beatrice. Yet here they were. They walked into the grand foyer wearing designer coats bought with my money. Their faces wore masks of deep concern, but their eyes darted around the elegant room like vultures assessing a fresh carcass. Mother Beatrice gasped. She rushed forward and wrapped her arms around my fragile shoulders. Her expensive perfume smelled like rot to me. "Look at you. You are so thin." Arthur stood behind her. He did not attempt to hug me. He simply stared down at my wheelchair with a look of barely concealed disgust. "We came as soon as we could." He lied smoothly. "Business in Europe kept us tied up." I wanted to speak, but my vocal cords were still stiff from the stroke. Words came out slow and slurred. I simply nodded. My youngest daughter, Chloe, stood quietly in the corner of the room. Chloe was deaf. She had spent the last half-year bathing me, feeding me, and holding my hand through the darkest and most terrifying nights. Arthur and Beatrice did not even look at her. To them, Chloe was invisible. Then, the first strike landed. My physical therapist, a kind woman named Sarah who had been helping me regain my mobility, walked into the room carrying my daily exercise bands. Arthur turned to her. His voice was cold and absolute. "Pack your things," Arthur commanded. Sarah blinked in confusion. "Excuse me, Mrs. Eleanor needs her daily session." "Not anymore," Arthur snapped. "My mother is clearly not improving. This expensive therapy is a massive waste of family resources. You are fired. Leave the premises immediately." My heart pounded violently against my ribs. I tried to raise my good hand. I tried to shout, "No." "Arthur." "She stays." The words came out as a weak, broken whisper. Beatrice patted my head as if I were a confused and dying dog. "Hush. Mother, you are not thinking clearly. Arthur is the acting head of the company now. He knows what is best for the family finances. We are cutting unnecessary costs." Unnecessary costs. My physical recovery was an unnecessary cost. I watched helplessly as Sarah was aggressively escorted out of my home by Arthur. Chloe signed frantically to me, her eyes wide with panic, asking what was happening. I reached out and squeezed her small hand. I forced a reassuring smile. But inside, a cold and terrifying fear began to take root. They were cutting my lifelines. They were isolating me. Later that afternoon, they thought I was fast asleep. They left my wheelchair facing the garden on the quiet sun porch. The heavy glass doors leading to the balcony were left slightly ajar. Arthur and Beatrice stood outside, smoking cigarettes and speaking in hushed, desperate tones. They did not realize that while my body was broken, my hearing was perfectly sharp. "The deadline is Friday," Arthur hissed. His voice was trembling with genuine terror. "Friday. Beatrice, do you understand what those people will do to me? They do not send warning letters. They break legs. They take blood." "Keep your voice down," Beatrice snapped. "I told you not to borrow from the underground syndicate. Millions of dollars. Arthur, you gambled away millions of dollars on those stupid offshore investments. I was trying to multiply the trust fund, Arthur growled defensively. But that does not matter now. We need cash instantly. We need to sell the downtown commercial block. The foreign buyers are ready. We can clear the massive debt and walk away rich. We cannot sell it. Beatrice reminded him bitterly. The title is still strictly in the old woman's name. The company lawyers will not allow a sale without her signature. And she will never sign away the core asset of the family empire. She is stubborn. She is clinging to power. I sat frozen in my wheelchair. My breathing stopped. My own children. The children I had worked 18 hours a day to provide for. I had built a real estate empire from the ashes of their father's bankruptcy. I had given them private elite schools, luxury cars, and golden lives. And now, Arthur had gambled it all away to violent criminals. Then we take the power from her. Arthur said. The sheer cruelty in his voice made my blood run cold. Look at her. Beatrice. She is half paralyzed. She can barely speak a full sentence. She is a useless husk taking up space. We just need to prove she is completely out of her mind. A medical proxy. Beatrice whispered. The dark realization dawned on her. If she is declared mentally incompetent, total control of the estate passes to us. Exactly. Arthur sneered. We get the power of attorney. We sell the buildings. We pay the syndicate. And we finally lock her away somewhere cheap where we do not have to look at her drooling face anymore. A sharp physical pain pierced my chest. It was not another stroke. It was the absolute shattering of a mother's heart. They did not love me. They did not even see me as human anymore. To them, I was just a dying obstacle blocking their access to a vault of cash. They were willing to destroy my dignity, my freedom, and my mind, just to save themselves from the consequences of their own toxic greed. Tears welled in my tired eyes, but they did not fall. Instead, the tears evaporated into a burning disgrace. Quiet rage. The loving mother who had endlessly coddled them died right there in that wheelchair on the sun porch. What remained was Eleanor, the ruthless business mogul who had crushed corporate sharks for 40 years. They thought I was weak. They thought my silence was mindless compliance. They had forgotten exactly who built the kingdom they were currently trying to steal. I carefully reached down with my good hand and locked the wheels of my chair. I would not panic. I would not scream. Screaming would only give them the exact proof of instability they desperately wanted. I had to be smarter. I had to let them think they were winning. Out on the balcony, Beatrice pulled a sleek phone from her designer purse. I will make the call, Beatrice said. Her voice was utterly devoid of any moral hesitation. I know a specialist. Someone who is very flexible with psychiatric diagnoses. If the price is right. She dialed the number. I held my breath in the shadows. Hello, Beatrice smiled a wicked, triumphant smile. Yes. Dr. Sterling. It is Beatrice. I am calling regarding my mother. Her mental condition has deteriorated rapidly. We need an urgent psychiatric evaluation. And we are willing to compensate you very generously for a specific conclusion. The trap was officially set. My own flesh and blood were preparing to bury me alive in a mental asylum. They thought I was a helpless victim. They did not know they were walking directly into a war. The gaslighting began the very next morning. It started with small, almost invisible things. I woke up reaching for the silver reading glasses I always kept on my nightstand. They were gone. I dragged my heavy legs out of bed and searched the mahogany drawers. Nothing. When Beatrice finally walked into my room, She held them in her manicured hand. "Looking for these?" Mother Beatrice asked. Her voice dripped with fake pity. "I found them in the kitchen refrigerator. You really need to be more careful. Your mind is slipping so fast." I stared at her in silence. I had not been to the kitchen in 3 days. My wheelchair could not even fit through the narrow pantry door. "I left them right here," I said slowly. My voice was raspy from the stroke. "Oh." "Mother." Beatrice sighed dramatically. She patted my cheek as if I were a foolish toddler. "The stroke did more damage than we thought. You are getting so confused. It is honestly tragic to watch. It was a calculated attack. They were building a narrative. Every misplaced item, every forgotten word, was a brick in the prison they were constructing for me." I closed my eyes and remembered the past. My late husband was a charming fool who left this world 30 years ago. He left me with massive debts and a crumbling company. I worked 18 hours a day to fix his mess. I scrubbed floors, negotiated with ruthless contractors, and fought like a wounded lioness to save our family name. I built a massive real estate empire so Arthur and Beatrice would never know the cold grip of poverty. I bought them expensive cars. I paid for elite universities in Europe. I gave them a kingdom. And this was my reward. They were using the very wealth I created to destroy me. They wanted to sell the downtown commercial block. It was my crown jewel. It was the only thing standing between them and the violent criminals Arthur owed millions to. The cruelty did not stop with me. By the afternoon, they turned their sights on Chloe. Chloe was always the gentle one. She was born deaf. But her heart heard everything. She stood in the living room, trying to sign to Arthur that I needed my herbal tea. Arthur mocked her. He waved his hands around in chaotic, nonsensical gestures. He laughed an ugly, hollow laugh as Chloe shrank back in humiliation. "Stop waving your hands at me," Arthur shouted. "I do not have time for this nonsense. Read my lips." Freak Beatrice grabbed Chloe by the arm. Her grip was brutally tight. "You are stressing Mother out. You need to pack your bags right now. You are moving to the old guest house by the back gate. Mother needs a quiet medical environment. And your constant hovering is making her symptoms worse." Chloe looked at me across the vast room. Her wide eyes begged for help. Tears streamed down her face. I gripped the armrests of my wheelchair so hard my knuckles turned white. Every maternal instinct screamed at me to rise. I wanted to slap Arthur across his arrogant face. I wanted to throw Beatrice out the front door into the street. But I could not. If I screamed, I was hysterical. If I cried, I was emotionally unstable. Anger was exactly the evidence they desperately needed to prove I was insane. They wanted a reaction. They craved an outburst. I forced my face to remain entirely blank. I looked at Chloe and gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Go. Be safe. I will fix this," Chloe cried quietly. But she obeyed. She dragged her heavy suitcase out the door. The house suddenly felt incredibly massive and entirely empty. That evening, Beatrice brought me my daily medication on a silver tray. A glass of cold water, 2 small pills. "Time for your blood pressure medicine." "Mother." She chirped happily. I looked down at the pills. I had taken my heart medication for 5 years. They were always small and pink. These were white and oval. "These are different," I murmured. Beatrice rolled her eyes in annoyance. The pharmacy changed the generic brand. "Just take them. Do not be difficult. I am exhausted from caring for you. I placed them on my dry tongue. I took a sip of water. I tilted my head back and swallowed loudly. Beatrice smiled, deeply satisfied. She turned on her high heels and left the room. The moment the heavy wooden door clicked shut, I spat the pills into my hand. I had hidden them safely under my tongue. I crushed one with my thumbnail. It smelled faintly of chalk and harsh chemicals. It was not blood pressure medicine. It was a mild sedative. They were intentionally drugging me. They wanted me groggy. They wanted me to look and act like a hollow shell of a human being. I wrapped the crushed pills in a tissue and hid them deep inside the lining of my wheelchair cushion. Evidence. Every predator makes a fatal mistake when they think their prey is dead. I would let them think the drugs were working. By nightfall, the final phase of their isolation campaign was complete. I heard the sharp drilling sounds from the front door. Arthur had hired a private security team. They changed every lock in the mansion. They installed new electronic keypads with glowing red lights. Arthur walked into my room and casually tossed a set of old, useless keys into the trash can. The neighborhood has been having security issues lately. Arthur lied smoothly. He did not even look me in the eye. We updated the system for your own safety. Mother, only Beatrice and I have the passcodes now. Do not try to wander outside. You might get lost and hurt yourself. I was officially a prisoner in my own home. My communication with the outside world was severed. My physical protector, Chloe, was banished to the yard. My mind was being chemically assaulted. They had all the power. They had all the access. They thought I was a broken old woman waiting for the end. I closed my eyes and let my head loll slightly to the side. I let my jaw go slack. I played the part of the fading matriarch perfectly. Inside, my mind was racing with absolute clarity. I cataloged every insult. I memorized every single lie. I was no longer a mother grieving her lost children. I was a chief executive dealing with a hostile corporate takeover. The grand clock in the hallway struck 4 in the afternoon the next day. The heavy new front door chimed. The doorbell echoed through the silent, suffocating house. I heard Beatrice running in her expensive heels across the marble floor. I heard the heavy door swing open. Dr. Sterling Beatrice greeted warmly. Thank you so much for coming on such short notice. We are just so worried about her. I slowly opened my eyes. The medical executioner had arrived. The battle was about to begin. Dr. Sterling walked into the foyer like a man who owned the world. He wore a custom-tailored suit that cost more than a decent car. But his eyes had the cheap, a hungry look of a street hustler. Beatrice took his heavy winter coat. Arthur shook his hand eagerly. They looked like 3 hyenas circling a wounded lioness. Where is the patient? Dr. Sterling asked smoothly. His voice was practiced and calm. In the living room, Arthur replied in a hushed tone. She is having a very bad day. Complete disorientation. She barely recognizes us. They walked into the grand room. I remained frozen in my wheelchair. I let my head droop slightly toward my chest. I let my left hand shake uncontrollably against my lap. I slowed my breathing until it sounded like a heavy, vacant wheeze. Eleanor, Dr. Sterling said softly. He crouched in front of my wheelchair. His expensive cologne masked the smell of my fear. I am Dr. Sterling. Can you look at me? Do you know where you are right now? I looked at him blankly. I let my mouth hang open for a second before speaking. My vocal cords felt tight. I am in my house. Where is my husband? He was just here. My husband had been dead for 30 years. It was a calculated and deliberate lie. I needed to give them exactly what they paid for. I needed them to drop their guard completely. Beatrice gasped dramatically. She covered her mouth with her manicured hands. Oh my God. She is asking for father again. This is getting worse every single hour. Dr. Sterling pulled a silver pen from his chest pocket. He began checking boxes on a thick medical clipboard. He did not shine a light in my eyes. He did not check my pulse. He did not perform a single actual neurological test to assess my stroke recovery. A real doctor would have noticed my sharp awareness. This man was simply building a fraudulent legal file. Eleanor. Can you tell me what year it is? He asked slowly. I slurred my words heavily. 19. Nined it. I let my voice trail off into a pathetic whimper. Advanced cognitive decline. Dr. Sterling murmured. He held up 3 fingers right in front of my face. How many fingers am I holding up? 2. I whispered. Tragic. Arthur sighed loudly. He stepped closer to the doctor. She nearly burned the kitchen down yesterday. Doctor, she forgot the stove was turned on. We are terrified she is going to hurt herself. Another blatant lie. I had not been in the kitchen all week. I had been locked in this chair, unable to even reach the stove. But Dr. Sterling simply nodded and wrote it down. Every lie Arthur told became a documented medical fact on that clipboard. She is entirely incapable of making financial or medical decisions. Dr. Sterling declared. His tone was clinical and absolute. Her dementia is severe and rapidly progressing. Leaving her in this house without professional restraint is a massive danger. She requires immediate inpatient care. Let us discuss the paperwork in the study. Beatrice suggested quickly. She pointed down the hallway. The 3 of them walked away. They left me sitting alone in the middle of the vast living room. They did not bother to close the heavy wooden door of the study all the way. They thought I was a deaf and mindless vegetable. They thought my brain was rotting inside my skull. Slowly. I reached down to the wheels of my chair. I unlocked the brakes. I pushed myself forward. Inch by agonizing inch, the thick Persian rug muffled the sound of the rubber tires. My arms ached from the effort. But the burning rage in my chest fueled my muscles. I stopped just outside the narrow crack of the study door. I reached deep into the hidden lining of my thick woolen robe. My fingers closed around a cold, heavy object. It was an old backup smartphone I used for international business trips years ago. It had no service. But the microphone and voice recorder worked perfectly. I pressed the red record button. I held the device near the gap in the door. Inside the room, the tone had completely changed. There was no more fake medical sympathy. There was only cold, hard business. The diagnosis is rock solid, Dr. Sterling said flatly. Severe dementia with aggressive tendencies. I will draft the recommendation for immediate involuntary commitment to the Oakwood Psychiatric Facility. They have a closed ward. She will not be allowed any outside contact. How soon can you issue the medical proxy? Arthur demanded. His voice was shaking with desperate greed. We need total legal control over her estate by tomorrow morning. We have foreign buyers waiting for the commercial properties. The proxy requires my official signature as the attending psychiatrist. Sterling replied calmly. And my signature, as we discussed on the phone, requires a specific administrative fee. I heard the distinct sound of a heavy paper envelope hitting the solid mahogany desk. $50,000 in untraceable cash. Beatrice said coldly. Half now. The other half when the transport team takes her away on Friday and the proxy is filed with our lawyers. A pleasure doing business with you. Dr. Sterling chuckled. I heard the sickening sound of his thumbs flicking through the thick stack of bills. My hand trembled. but I kept the phone perfectly steady. I had them. The audio was crystal clear. They were buying my death warrant with my own cash. To the law. Severe dementia meant losing my personhood. It meant I was a ghost. They were legally erasing their own mother. I pressed stop. I saved the audio file. I slipped the phone back into my deep robe pocket. I rolled my wheelchair backward, returning to my exact previous spot in the living room just seconds before the study doors swung open. Dr. Sterling walked out, smiling. He handed Beatrice a small slip of paper. "This is a prescription for a heavy-grade sedative." Sterling instructed, "She is going to become agitated as the dementia progresses. You need to keep her docile until the transport team arrives on Friday evening. 2 pills every 4 hours. Do not skip a single dose. Thank you." "Doctor," Arthur said fervently, "you are saving this family." Sterling left. The heavy front door slammed shut. The deadbolt clicked loudly. I was completely alone with my monsters. Beatrice went straight to the kitchen. I heard the sound of a plastic pill bottle opening. I heard the grinding of powder in a bowl. She walked back into the living room carrying a tall glass of warm milk. Arthur stood beside her. He looked down at me with cold, dead eyes. All pretense of love was gone. "Time for your medicine." "Mother," Beatrice cooed. She held the glass to my dry lips. It smelled faintly bitter and entirely toxic. I clamped my mouth shut. I shook my head slowly. I played the role of the frightened old woman perfectly. Arthur lost his patience instantly. The fake polite son vanished into thin air. He stepped forward and grabbed my jaw with his large hand. His thick fingers dug painfully into my fragile skin. He squeezed my cheeks together with brutal force until my mouth popped open. "Drink it," Arthur snarled. His breath smelled of stale coffee and pure malice. "I am done playing games with you. You are going to drink this. And you are going to sleep. And you are never going to be a problem for us again." Beatrice tilted the glass. The bitter liquid poured directly into my throat. I choked. I coughed violently. Tears of genuine physical pain pricked the corners of my eyes. "Swallow it," Arthur commanded loudly. He clamped his heavy hand over my mouth so I could not spit the liquid out. I had no choice. I swallowed the bitter milk. The heavy sedative slid down my throat like liquid lead. Arthur finally released his brutal grip. I gasped for air, my chest heaving in panic. "Good girl," Beatrice mocked softly. She wiped my chin with a napkin. My vision began to blur almost immediately. The drug was incredibly strong. The edges of the elegant room darkened into shadows. But even as my body surrendered to the crushing chemical weight, my mind held tightly to the recording hidden in my pocket. They thought they had poisoned my brain. They thought they had won. They did not know they had just handed me the exact weapon I needed to destroy their entire lives. The heavy sedative dragged me down into a dark, suffocating pit. I fought the chemical weight with every ounce of my willpower. I lay in my massive bed for hours. I kept my breathing shallow and erratic. I let my jaw hang open. Beatrice came into the room twice to check on me. She poked my fragile shoulder with her sharp fingernail. I did not move a single muscle. She smiled a wicked smile and walked away. By noon the next day, the massive house was eerily quiet. But the silence was broken by heavy footsteps in the hallway. Arthur was pacing back and forth. He was shouting on his phone. "I need 2 more days," Arthur screamed. His voice cracked with genuine panic. "I swear to you. The property will be legally mine by the weekend. Do not touch my bank accounts. Do not send your men to my office again." He slammed his fist against the mahogany wall. He was terrified. He was leaving to meet his underworld creditors in person. He was a desperate man. Desperation makes a man blind to the traps laid right in front of him. Beatrice was upstairs, soaking in a luxury bubble bath, completely ignoring the world. This was my only window of opportunity. I forced my heavy body to sit up. My muscles screamed in agonizing protest. My head spun from the lingering toxic drugs. I reached my good hand under the thick mattress. My fingernails tore against the heavy fabric until I found the hidden slit. I pulled out a small, sealed velvet pouch. Inside was a secure, encrypted flash drive and a handwritten legal directive I had prepared months ago. I had prepared it back when I first suspected Arthur was secretly draining the minor company accounts. I dragged myself to the window overlooking the cold garden. I flashed a small silver mirror catching the afternoon sun. 1, 2, 3 quick flashes. 10 minutes later, the back door of my bedroom slowly creaked open. Chloe slipped inside. She looked absolutely terrified. Her eyes were red from crying all night in the cold guest house. I pulled her close to my chest. I pressed the velvet pouch into her trembling hands. I looked directly into her eyes and mouthed the words very slowly and deliberately. Go to the post office. Send this to Mr. Vance. Priority overnight delivery. Chloe looked at the name written on the thick envelope. She knew Mr. Vance. He was the oldest and most ruthless corporate lawyer my late husband had ever hired. Chloe nodded firmly. She hid the pouch deep under her oversized winter sweater. She slipped out the door like a silent ghost. Midnight finally arrived. The house was pitch black. Beatrice was fast asleep in the master suite. Arthur had not returned from his dangerous meeting. I sat completely alone in the dark bedroom. I pulled the hidden burner phone from my thick robe. I dialed a secure private number I had memorized decades ago. The glowing screen lit up my wrinkled, determined face. Mr. Vance answered on the very second ring. His face appeared on the video call. He looked old, tired, but his pale eyes were as sharp as ever. Eleanor, Mr. Vance whispered deeply. I received the secure courier alert from Chloe an hour ago. I decrypted the drive. What exactly is happening in that house? They are moving against me. Richard, I whispered back. My voice was raspy but completely clear. There was no trace of the confused old woman. Arthur owes millions of dollars to an underground gambling syndicate. He bought a fraudulent psychiatric evaluation yesterday afternoon. They are going to declare me legally incompetent by Friday evening. Mr. Vance adjusted his wire glasses. A look of pure professional disgust washed over his face. Those ungrateful little parasites. I will call the federal authorities right now. We will have them arrested for medical fraud, forgery, and elder abuse before sunrise. No, I hissed sharply into the phone. Do not call the police. Do not alert anyone. If the police arrive now, Arthur will play the victim. The corrupt doctor will deny everything. I need them to sign the official papers. I need them to pull the legal trigger themselves. Mr. Vance leaned closer to his camera. He knew my tactics well. What are you asking me to do? Eleanor, you are playing a very dangerous game. We are activating the sunset clause, I commanded. Mr. Vance actually gasped softly. Are you absolutely certain once the sunset clause is triggered, the entire estate goes into a blind trust? It is an irrevocable action. It cannot be reversed. You will lose direct legal control of your own massive empire. I built this empire from dirt to protect my family, I said coldly. But my family is dead to me. Trigger the clause. Richard, the moment Arthur files that medical proxy claiming I am insane, The clause automatically activates. It is a financial dead man switch. I paused to let the reality of the trap settle. Total financial control transfers immediately to Chloe. I continued. Every bank account, every property deed, every single corporate asset will be permanently frozen by the trust. Arthur and Beatrice think Chloe is legally helpless because she is deaf. They are completely wrong. They will not be able to sell a single brick of this house to pay their violent debts. It is a brilliantly cruel trap. Mr. Vance murmured. A slow, predatory smile forming on his weathered face. Arthur thinks his signature will give him the keys to the kingdom. But the moment he signs, he will actually lock himself out forever. And the criminal syndicate will be waiting for their money. Exactly. I replied firmly. Let them dig their own graves. Have the final documents ready. Richard, bring them to the house on Friday evening. Play along with Arthur. Let him think he has finally defeated me. It will be done. Madam, Mr. Vance said with deep respect. He ended the video call. I sat in the dark room. The heavy fear that had gripped my chest for the past 2 days completely vanished. The bitter tears were entirely gone. I was no longer a helpless mother crying over her cruel children. I was the executioner. I was weaving an invisible legal noose. And Arthur was incredibly eager to put his own neck inside it. I climbed back into my bed. I pulled the heavy wool blankets over my chest. I slept peacefully for the first time in 6 long months. The next morning, the nightmare resumed in the daylight. But I was fully prepared. I sat in my wheelchair in the very center of the grand living room. My head was tilted back. My eyes were half closed. A thin trail of warm saliva ran down my chin. I played the pathetic role of the broken vegetable with absolute perfection. The heavy front door swung open loudly. Arthur walked in. But he was not alone. He was accompanied by 3 strange, intimidating men. They did not wear expensive business suits. They wore cheap leather jackets. Their thick necks were covered in dark prison tattoos. They smelled of cheap tobacco and raw violence. They were black market real estate brokers. Syndicate men. This is the property, Arthur announced proudly. His voice echoed loudly in the grand foyer. 10,000 square feet of prime downtown real estate. The title officially clears by Friday night. You can bring the bulldozers and demolish the whole thing by Monday morning. One of the tattooed men walked right up to my wheelchair. He looked down at me with utter contempt. He blew a thick cloud of foul smoke directly into my face. I coughed weakly, keeping my eyes vacant. What about the old lady? The violent thug asked roughly. Arthur laughed. It was a cold, empty sound that echoed in the vast room. Do not worry about the walking corpse. Arthur sneered loudly. He pointed a finger at my face. She is going to a locked psychiatric ward tomorrow night. She does not even know her own name anymore. She is a ghost. I did not blink. I did not flinch. I just sat there, listening to them confidently sell the roof over my head. They thought they were measuring my coffin. They did not know I was measuring theirs. The sun rose on Thursday morning. But the grand house felt much colder than a tomb. Arthur stood by the large bay window in the living room. He was holding a cup of black coffee. His hands were shaking so violently that the dark liquid spilled onto the pristine white rug. He was watching the front gates. He was waiting for a ghost to appear. At exactly 10 in the morning, a massive black vehicle rolled slowly up the driveway. It did not stop at the electronic intercom. It simply smashed right through the heavy iron gates. The screeching metal echoed through the entire estate. Arthur dropped his coffee cup. The porcelain shattered against the floor. No. No. Please. 3 massive men stepped out of the dark vehicle. They wore thick leather coats. They carried heavy steel pipes. They did not walk toward the front door to knock. They walked directly toward Arthur's shiny silver sports car parked in the center of the driveway. Crash. The first swing shattered the pristine windshield. The second swing completely destroyed the expensive headlights. The loud, violent sounds made my heart jump inside my chest, but I kept my face entirely blank. I sat in my wheelchair near the hallway, watching the destruction unfold in perfect silence. Arthur ran out the front door. He held his hands up in complete surrender. He looked like a frightened child. "I have the money," Arthur screamed in pure panic. "I am selling the commercial buildings tomorrow. The legal proxy is almost done. Just give me 24 hours. The largest man grabbed Arthur by the collar of his expensive silk shirt. He lifted my grown son right off his feet. He whispered something dark and terrible into Arthur's ear. He shoved a crumpled piece of paper directly into Arthur's mouth. Then, the massive man threw my son down onto the cold gravel. The 3 men got back into the black vehicle and drove away. Arthur crawled on his hands and knees over the sharp gravel. He pulled the crumpled paper from his mouth. It was stained with fresh blood. It was a final, irreversible warning. He stumbled back into the grand foyer. His face was pale as a rotting corpse. His breathing was ragged and shallow. He looked up and saw me sitting in my wheelchair in the shadows. His terrified eyes suddenly filled with blind, irrational rage. He needed a victim. He needed someone weaker than himself to punish for his own pathetic failures. He marched across the marble floor. He grabbed the metal armrests of my wheelchair. He leaned his sweating face mere inches from mine. "This is your fault," Arthur roared. Spit flew from his trembling lips and hit my cheek. "If you had just signed the property papers, my car would not be destroyed, my life would not be in danger." I simply stared at him. I let my jaw hang open loosely. I blinked slowly, playing the role of the confused, dying old woman. "Stop looking at me like that," he screamed. He reached out and grabbed my left arm. His massive fingers dug deeply into my thin, fragile skin. The physical pain was sudden and blinding. He squeezed with all his frustrated strength. The hand I used to hold when he was a little boy learning to walk was now trying to break my bones. "You are nothing," Arthur hissed maliciously. "You are a dried husk. You are a useless burden blocking my way. You are going to die in a padded cell. And I will finally be free of you." He shoved my arm away violently. My wheelchair rolled backward and slammed hard into the heavy mahogany table. A priceless ceramic vase fell and crashed to the floor. Arthur did not even flinch. He stormed upstairs, leaving me entirely alone with the dark bruises forming rapidly on my pale skin. I looked down at the purple marks on my arm. The physical pain was sharp, but it did not break my spirit. It only hardened my cold resolve. He had crossed the final boundary. He had used physical violence against the mother who gave him life. The ledger of his sins was now completely full. An hour later, Beatrice sneaked down the grand staircase. She wore a heavy winter coat. She carried her large designer handbag. She thought I was sleeping in the living room, but my eyes were slightly open. She crept silently into my master bedroom. I pushed my wheelchair slowly down the hallway. I stopped just outside the open door and watched her. Beatrice was tearing through my private vanity drawers. She pulled out my heavy velvet jewelry box. Her greedy fingers sifted through the gold rings and pearl earrings until she found it. The grand diamond necklace. It was a priceless family heirloom. My late husband had given it to me on our 20th anniversary. It was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Beatrice held the diamonds up to the light. A wicked, satisfied smile spread across her face. You do not need these in the asylum. Mother, Beatrice whispered to herself. She shoved the glowing necklace deep into her handbag. She needed immediate cash. The underground medical transport team and the corrupt doctor demanded their remaining bribe money by Friday evening. Arthur's bank accounts were completely empty, so Beatrice willingly became a common thief in her own mother's bedroom. She turned around and suddenly saw me sitting in the doorway. For one brief second, a flash of genuine guilt crossed her eyes. But it vanished instantly. She smoothed her expensive coat and lifted her chin arrogantly. I am taking these to the bank vault for safekeeping. Beatrice lied smoothly. You keep leaving the doors open. Mother, we cannot risk a robbery in your confused state. She stepped over the threshold and walked right past me. She smelled of deep desperation and cheap morality. I watched her leave the house. I knew she was going straight to a black market pawn shop. They were stripping my entire empire down to the bones just to save their own skin. The sun began to set over the estate. The massive house grew darker and colder. Arthur came back downstairs. He had packed a small leather suitcase. He was terrified the syndicate men would return during the night to finish the job. He paced the wooden floor of the study. He held his phone tightly to his ear. He was breathing heavily like a hunted animal. Sterling Arthur barked into the phone. Listen to me very carefully. We cannot wait until the weekend. I need the transport team here tomorrow evening. Do you understand me, Friday night? Get her out of my house. I sat quietly in the shadows of the hallway, listening to my eldest son arrange my forced kidnapping. I do not care how much it costs, Arthur yelled frantically. Beatrice is getting the rest of your cash right now. Just bring the straitjacket, bring the heavy sedatives. I want the medical proxy signed and filed before midnight tomorrow. If I do not have total control of the estate by Saturday morning, I am a dead man. He hung up the phone. He threw it violently onto the leather sofa. He collapsed into a chair and buried his face in his trembling hands. He was completely broken. He was a pathetic coward, hiding desperately behind his mother's money. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow was the night they planned to erase my existence completely from the world. They firmly believed the medical proxy was their golden ticket to freedom. They thought sending me to a locked psychiatric ward would magically solve all their massive illegal debts. I gently rubbed the dark purple bruises on my arm. The pain was real. But the betrayal was absolute. Let them bring the corrupt doctors. Let them bring the canvas straitjacket. Let them sign the official papers. They were busy building a massive guillotine for me. But they were eagerly putting their own heads right on the chopping block. Friday morning arrived with a cold, gray sky. It was the final day of my supposed life. Beatrice walked into my bedroom just after dawn. She did not bring breakfast. She brought a cold, calculated cruelty. She stripped the heavy blankets off my bed. She rummaged through my nightstand drawers. She disconnected the landline telephone and shoved it into her large designer bag. Then, Arthur walked in carrying a heavy metal wrench. He did not say a single word. He knelt beside my wheelchair. I watched in silent horror as he unscrewed the large rubber wheels. He removed them completely and carried them out of the room. My chair was now just a useless, crippled piece of furniture sitting on the floor. You will stay right here, Mother, Beatrice commanded softly. She smiled an empty smile. The medical transport team will arrive at 8 in the evening. We do not want you wandering off and hurting yourself before your big trip. They walked out. The heavy wooden doors slammed shut. I heard the sharp click of the deadbolt sliding into place. I was locked inside. Through the thick glass of my bedroom window, I could see the old guest house across the frost-covered lawn. Arthur was marching toward it. He held a heavy steel padlock and a thick metal chain. I pressed my face against the cold window pane. Chloe was standing inside the guest house, banging her small fists against the glass door. Arthur wrapped the chain around the exterior handles. He snapped the heavy padlock shut. He looked right at Chloe's terrified face and laughed. He completely trapped her. He wanted to ensure there were absolutely no interruptions tonight. My youngest daughter fell to her knees, crying silently behind the locked glass. My fingernails dug into the wooden windowsill until my skin bled. The absolute rage burning inside me was hotter than a furnace, but I swallowed it down. I needed the fire to forge the steel of my final trap. By 7 in the evening, the grand house was eerily festive. My bedroom was located just above the main living room. Through the floorboards, I could hear the distinct pop of an expensive champagne cork. I heard the clinking of crystal glasses. Arthur and Beatrice were having a private celebration. To the future, Arthur declared loudly. His voice drifted up through the air vents. To freedom, and to never worrying about money ever again. To the future, Beatrice echoed happily. The underground brokers sent over the preliminary sale contracts. Arthur. I reviewed the terms. Once Dr. Sterling signs the proxy tonight, we countersign these papers, and the downtown block is officially sold. The money transfers by Monday morning. Bring the contracts here, Arthur said eagerly. Let us sign our parts right now. When the ambulance takes the old bat away, I want to immediately email these to the syndicate to prove the debt is covered. They were signing the illegal pre-sale agreements. They were legally tying their own names to a massive financial fraud. Their absolute arrogance was blinding them to basic legal safety. They overreached. They were eagerly putting the rope around their own necks and pulling it tight. The sun dipped below the horizon. My bedroom was plunged into complete darkness. Beatrice had purposely turned off the breaker switch for my room. She wanted me sitting in the terrifying dark, waiting for the men in white coats. But Beatrice was deeply careless. When she searched my room that morning, she had dropped a thin white folder on the edge of my long mahogany dresser. She thought I was completely immobilized without my wheelchair wheels. She thought I could not reach it. I slid my fragile body off the edge of the large mattress. I hit the hardwood floor with a heavy thud. Sharp pain shot up my spine. My left leg dragged uselessly behind me, but I did not stop. I planted my good right hand on the cold floor and pulled my body forward, inch by agonizing inch. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. I remembered when Arthur was a small boy. He was terrified of the dark. I used to sit by his bed for hours, holding his small hand until he fell asleep. Now, he had purposely plunged my room into darkness to terrorize me. I remembered Beatrice begging for expensive designer dresses for her school dances. I worked overtime to buy them. Now, she was eagerly paying a corrupt doctor to put me in a canvas straitjacket. I crawled like a wounded animal through my own home. I finally reached the base of the heavy dresser. I reached my arm up into the darkness. My trembling fingers brushed against the smooth paper folder. I pulled it down. A single beam of pale moonlight pierced through the window. I held the papers up to the light. It was the finalized draft of the medical proxy and the involuntary commitment order. I read the horrific words printed on the stark white page. Patient is completely detached from reality. Highly aggressive. Requires permanent isolation in the maximum security psychiatric wing. Chemical restraints strongly advised. Total legal and financial authority transferred to the primary sponsors. Arthur and Beatrice. They were not just sending me to a hospital, they had specifically requested the maximum security wing. They wanted me heavily sedated, strapped to a bed, unable to ever speak to a lawyer or a judge. They wanted to bury my mind in a chemical grave. A single tear rolled down my wrinkled cheek. It was the very last tear I would ever shed for my cruel children. I folded the horrific document. I shoved it deep inside the pocket of my nightgown. I used the heavy dresser to pull my body up from the floor. My weak legs shook violently, but I forced them to hold my weight. I leaned against the cold wall. I would not let the corrupt medical team find me crawling on the floor like a pathetic victim. I would face my executioners standing up. Suddenly, the quiet night air was shattered by a piercing wail. Sirens, flashing red and blue lights, swept across my bedroom walls, casting terrifying shadows across the dark room. The heavy tires of a massive vehicle crunched over the gravel driveway. "They are here," Arthur shouted from downstairs. His voice was filled with pure, sickening joy. "Beatrice, get the front door. The doctor is here." The sound of heavy, booted footsteps echoed on the front porch. The heavy oak doors swung open loudly. The final act of my absolute destruction had officially arrived, and my trap was waiting patiently in the dark. The heavy wooden door to my bedroom swung open. The blinding hallway light spilled into the darkness. Two massive men in sterile white uniforms stepped inside. They did not look like nurses or medical professionals. They looked like prison guards. One of them carried a heavy canvas straitjacket. The thick leather straps dangled ominously toward the cold floor. Dr. Sterling walked in behind them. He wore a crisp gray suit and a professional frown. Beatrice and Arthur followed closely. They were both dressed in impeccable evening wear, as if they were attending a high society gala rather than their own mother's commitment. Beatrice held a silk handkerchief to her dry eyes. She was playing the role of the heartbroken daughter to absolute perfection. "Mother," Beatrice sobbed falsely. She did not step too close. "Please do not be afraid. These nice men are going to take you to a special hospital. They will fix your mind. You will be so much happier there." I did not look at her. I kept my eyes wide and entirely vacant. I let my knees buckle slightly. I slid down the wall until I was sitting helplessly on the floor. I began to tremble. I let out a soft, pathetic whimper. The performance had to be completely flawless. If they saw even a hint of my true mind, they might hesitate. "She is entirely non-responsive," Dr. Sterling noted in his clinical voice. He did not even check my pulse. He turned to the two large orderlies. "Prepare the restraints. She has a history of sudden aggression and wandering. We cannot risk her hurting herself during the transport. Secure her arms tightly." The men stepped forward. The heavy canvas dragged across the floorboards. But before they could lay their heavy hands on me, a sharp voice echoed from the hallway. "Stop exactly where you are." Mr. Vance stepped into the bedroom. He carried his worn leather briefcase. His silver hair caught the bright hallway light. He looked at the two orderlies with absolute legal authority. The massive men hesitated and took a cautious step back. Arthur sneered. His face contorted with sudden anger. "What are you doing here?" "Vance, we told you the medical transport was tonight. We do not need corporate counsel for a simple hospital transfer. You need me if you want to execute a total transfer of the family estate." Mr. Vance replied coldly. He walked past Arthur and placed his briefcase on my mahogany dresser. He snapped the brass locks open and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. "As the executor of your late father's original trusts, I am legally required to witness the signing of the medical proxy. If I do not physically witness the signature and notarize it tonight, The title transfer for the downtown commercial block will not clear the bank by Monday morning. Arthur's eyes widened. The mention of the commercial block instantly killed his arrogance. He desperately needed that sale. He needed the millions in cash to save his life from the violent syndicate men who destroyed his car yesterday. Fine, Arthur snapped impatiently. He waved his hand toward the papers. Give me the damn pen. Let us get this over with right now. Mr. Vance placed the papers flat on the dresser. He laid a solid gold pen next to them. The attending physician must sign first, declaring the patient entirely incompetent and a danger to herself. Then, the primary sponsors must sign to assume total legal and financial authority over all her assets. Dr. Sterling stepped up to the dresser. He casually adjusted his expensive silk tie. He confidently picked up the pen and signed his name on the fraudulent medical proxy. He officially condemned a perfectly sane woman to a locked asylum. All for $50,000 in dirty cash. Your turn, Dr. Sterling said smoothly. Arthur practically shoved the corrupt doctor out of the way. He grabbed the gold pen. His hands were shaking with pure, unadulterated greed. But before he put the pen to the thick paper, he stopped. Arthur turned around and walked slowly over to where I sat, trembling on the cold floor. He crouched down so his face was level with mine. He leaned in so close I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. He wanted to savor his victory. Look at me, Arthur whispered venomously. I met his eyes. I kept my chin trembling. I let a single tear roll down my cheek. You lost, Arthur hissed directly into my ear. You held onto the power for 30 years. You treated me like an incompetent child. Now, I am taking everything. They are going to strap you to a bed. They are going to pump you full of chemicals until you cannot remember your own name. And while you are rotting in the dark, I am going to spend every single penny of your precious empire. He smiled a terrifying, soulless smile. He patted my bruised arm roughly. Then he stood back up and walked proudly to the dresser. I let a loud, broken sob escape my lips. Beatrice patted Arthur on the shoulder, silently praising his absolute cruelty. Arthur pressed the pen to the thick paper. He signed his name with a violent, sweeping flourish. Beatrice took the pen next and eagerly signed right below his name. The dark ink soaked deep into the paper. The trap was officially sprung. They had done exactly what I needed them to do. It is done, Arthur declared triumphantly. He turned to the medical team with a wide, victorious grin. Put the straitjacket on her. Get her out of my house. The two massive men stepped toward me, unfolding the thick canvas straps. The heavy canvas straps dragged across the hardwood floor. The two massive men stepped closer. Arthur smiled a wide, arrogant smile. He thought he had completely won. He thought he had successfully erased his own mother from the world. Take her, Arthur commanded sharply. Get her out of my sight. The first orderly reached out his thick hand to grab my bruised arm. I did not whimper. I did not shake. I slapped his massive hand away with absolute force. The loud smack echoed like a gunshot through the silent bedroom. Do not touch me, I said. My voice was no longer a raspy, broken whisper. It was sharp. It was commanding. It was the voice of a chief executive officer who had crushed men twice their size in the corporate boardroom. Arthur froze completely. The arrogant smile melted off his face. Beatrice gasped loudly and dropped her expensive silk handkerchief. I placed my good hand on the armrest of the broken wheelchair and pushed myself up. My legs trembled violently, but I forced my knees to lock. I stood up from the cold floor. I stood tall. The fragile, dying old woman vanished completely into the cold night air. The matriarch of the family had returned. "What is this?" Dr. Sterling stammered in sudden panic. He took a nervous step backward toward the heavy door. "The patient is having a severe manic episode. Restrain her immediately. The patient is perfectly sane." "Doctor," Mr. Vance said smoothly. The old lawyer stepped forward and picked up the freshly signed medical proxy from the mahogany dresser. He held the thick paper up to the light like a hunting trophy. "And you just committed absolute career suicide." Arthur stepped forward. His face was pale as a ghost, but his desperate greed made him blind to the danger. "Stop this nonsense right now. She is insane. She is acting. I have the signed legal proxy. I am officially in charge of this estate. You are in charge of absolutely nothing." Mr. Vance replied coldly. He opened a thick red folder from his worn leather briefcase. He pulled out a crisp legal document bearing the golden seal of the state. "This is the Irrevocable Family Trust. Drafted and signed by your mother exactly 1 month ago." Arthur stared at the paper. His chest heaved in panic. "What trust? The estate is entirely in her name. I checked the deeds yesterday. It was in my name." I corrected him sharply. I walked slowly toward my eldest son. Every single step was agonizing, my spine burning with physical pain. But the absolute victory numbed the hurt. I stood directly in front of him. I looked deep into his terrified eyes. "Until you so eagerly signed that medical document tonight," I whispered coldly. "You see? Arthur, I knew you were stealing from the minor company accounts. I knew you were desperate. I knew you owed millions to violent criminals. So I laid a legal trap. And you walked right into it with your greedy eyes wide open." Mr. Vance adjusted his wire glasses. He read from the legal document with a booming, authoritative voice. "The trust contains a specific sunset clause," Mr. Vance declared. "It states that the exact moment Eleanor is officially declared mentally or physically incompetent by a licensed physician, total control of the entire estate is immediately and permanently transferred into a blind trust." "No." Beatrice gasped in horror. She stumbled backward until her back hit the bedroom wall. She clutched her stolen designer bag tightly against her chest. "Yes." Mr. Vance continued ruthlessly. "Every bank account, every property deed, the downtown commercial block, it is all permanently frozen by the federal bank. Neither you nor Arthur have any legal authority to sell a single brick of this empire. The sole beneficiary and voting proxy is now your youngest sister, Chloe." Arthur looked like he had been shot directly in the chest. His jaw dropped. His hands shook violently. "Chloe, the deaf freak. She cannot run a real estate company. She does not have to run it." I said calmly, "Mr. Vance and the board of directors will manage the corporate assets for her. But you, Arthur, you will not see a single penny of my money ever again. You just willingly signed away your entire inheritance to put me in a straitjacket." Dr. Sterling finally realized the massive legal danger he had stepped into. His face turned an ugly shade of gray. He frantically grabbed his black medical bag. "I was completely deceived. This family lied to me about her medical condition. I am leaving right now. You are not going anywhere." "Doctor," I said. I reached into the deep pocket of my nightgown. I pulled out the old burner phone. I pressed the play button and turned the volume to the absolute maximum. The crisp audio recording filled the tense bedroom. Beatrice's cold, calculating voice echoed clearly from the speaker. $50,000 in untraceable cash. Half now. The other half when the transport team takes her away. Dr. Sterling's smug, arrogant voice followed right after. A pleasure doing business with you. The two massive orderlies looked at their boss in complete shock. They were hired muscle. But they were not fools. They did not want to go to federal prison for kidnapping and medical fraud. They dropped the heavy canvas straitjacket onto the floor. They quickly backed out of the room and ran down the grand staircase. Dr. Sterling fell to his knees. His expensive gray suit wrinkled against the cold floor. Please. Mrs. Eleanor. I beg you, I will shred the medical proxy. I will burn it right now. Just delete that recording. Mr. Vance already sent the encrypted audio file to the Federal Medical Board and the local police department an hour ago, I said without a single ounce of mercy. Your medical license is completely destroyed. Your reputation is dead. And you are going to a federal prison for a very long time. Beatrice began to hyperventilate. She dropped her heavy bag. The priceless diamond necklace she had stolen from my vanity spilled out onto the floor. It sparkled mocking in the pale moonlight. She was completely exposed as a common thief in front of the corporate lawyer. Arthur grabbed his own hair. He pulled it so hard his scalp nearly bled. He fell heavily against the mahogany dresser. He knocked over a silver lamp. The commercial block. I have to sell it. The syndicate men, they are going to kill me. They are going to break my legs. Then you better start running very fast, I whispered. Suddenly, the sharp, violent buzzing of a cell phone shattered the heavy silence in the room. It was Arthur's phone in his coat pocket. Arthur pulled it out slowly. His hands trembled so badly he nearly dropped it. The caller identification flashed brightly in the dark room. It was the underground syndicate boss. The violent criminals had somehow learned that the commercial property title was suddenly frozen in a blind trust. They knew the sale was canceled. They knew the money was completely gone. Arthur looked at me. His eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated terror. He finally realized the absolute magnitude of his mistake. He had built a massive, cruel guillotine to cut off my head, but he had eagerly laid his own neck right on the bloody block. The trap had snapped shut, and there was absolutely no escape. Arthur fell to his knees. The broken glass crunched loudly under his expensive trousers. He crawled across the hardwood floor toward me, his trembling hands reaching out to grab the hem of my nightgown. Mother. Please, Arthur begged. Tears of absolute terror streamed down his pale face. You have to cancel the trust. Call Mr. Vance. Tell him it was a terrible mistake if I do not pay those men. They will kill me tonight. I looked down at him. I felt absolutely nothing. The mother who would have traded her own soul to save him died the exact moment he poured that bitter sedative down my throat. I cannot help you. Arthur, I said smoothly. I tilted my head and gave him a blank, vacant smile. Did you not just sign a legal document claiming I am completely insane? A confused old woman has absolutely no legal power to alter an irrevocable family trust? You planned this, Beatrice screamed. She was still sitting helplessly on the floor, clutching her empty designer bag. You knew about his underground debts. You trapped us on purpose. I simply handed you the rope. Beatrice, I replied coldly. You two are the ones who so eagerly tied the noose. Outside the bedroom window, the wailing sound of approaching sirens grew deafeningly loud. Flashing blue and red lights suddenly illuminated the dark driveway. Mr. Vance had not just called the medical board. He had called the federal police. But the police were not the only ones arriving. A massive crash echoed from the front gates. The heavy iron doors were smashed open again. Heavy boots stomped aggressively across the marble foyer downstairs. The violent syndicate men had arrived to collect their bloody debt. "They are inside," Arthur shrieked. He scrambled backward into the darkest corner of the room, curling his large body into a pathetic ball. The bedroom door burst wide open. 2 armed federal officers rushed inside, their heavy weapons drawn. Right behind them, down in the grand hallway, a violent brawl broke out as the police intercepted the armed syndicate thugs. The elegant mansion turned into an absolute war zone. Dr. Sterling, an officer, shouted over the deafening chaos. "You are under arrest for medical fraud and criminal conspiracy." Sterling did not even try to run. He dropped his expensive medical bag onto the floor and held out his shaking wrists. The corrupt doctor was completely finished. Another officer stepped directly over the spilled diamonds. He grabbed Beatrice by her expensive winter coat and pulled her roughly to her feet. "Beatrice and Arthur, you are both being detained for federal wire fraud and severe elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent." Beatrice sobbed uncontrollably as the cold steel handcuffs snapped tightly around her wrists. Arthur just stared blankly at the wall. Completely broken. They had tried to sell my life for quick cash, and they ended up permanently selling their own freedom. I turned away from them. I did not want to watch them cry. I walked slowly out of the dark bedroom. My legs were no longer weak. My spine was perfectly straight. I walked down the grand mahogany staircase, stepping carefully over the shattered glass and ruined luxury furniture. The house was a complete disaster, but my mind was entirely at peace. I walked out the front door into the cool night air. Chloe was standing by the iron garden gate. The police had already cut the heavy chain Arthur used to lock her inside. She ran toward me. I opened my arms and held her tightly against my chest. She was trembling, but she was finally safe. I looked back at the massive mansion one last time. It was no longer my home. It was simply a cold monument to their incredible greed. The family empire was frozen. My absolute dignity was fully restored. I took Chloe by the hand. We walked down the long driveway together, leaving the flashing police lights and the screaming cowards far behind us. The long nightmare was officially over. A quiet, honest life was just beginning.